have an amazing flight, and enjoy those views of our beautiful planet.
On May 30th, 2 NASA astronauts climbed inside a space capsule and launched on top of a rocket, en route to the International Space Station.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9.
That sounds routine, but it's actually monumental for 2 different reasons. For starters, these are the first 2 American astronauts to launch to orbit from American soil in nearly a decade. And the vehicle they're riding in, it was commercially made by the company SpaceX, not NASA. It's a culmination of NASA's Commercial Crew program, and the first time a private company has ever launched humans to orbit. If the rest of this mission goes well, it could kickstart a very different era of human spaceflight. Inside and out, the mission has a very different look from human launches of the past. This is the Crew Dragon, SpaceX's new crew capsule. It's designed specifically to launch on top of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket and ferry people to and from low Earth orbit. It's actually a modification of the company's Dragon cargo capsule. That's been taking supplies to the ISS for the last decade, but this one's outfitted with new bells and whistles, life support systems, sleek chairs, shiny touchscreen displays. SpaceX has also designed custom pressure suits. They're meant to keep astronauts protected from the harsh environment of space if there's an emergency. And they're tailor-made for the needs of the capsule. Those are actually touchscreen gloves for the Dragon's modern displays. Finally, the Crew Dragon sports a sophisticated docking system that's entirely automatic. Using a series of sensors and cameras, the vehicle can approach the ISS all on its own and latch onto a docking port.
All 3 engines up and burning.
The last time that Americans launched from the US was on July 8, 2011, when Space Shuttle Atlantis took off from Florida with a crew of 4.
Roger roll, Atlantis.
Since that day, NASA has relied on Russia to get astronauts to and from the International Space Station. It hasn't been the best situation. Russia charges the US around $80 million a seat for a ride on their Soyuz capsule, and if the Soyuz were to go out of commission, there really isn't a fallback. The Commercial Crew program frees NASA from their reliance on Russia, but it's also a new model for spacecraft development. The idea is this: rather than have the government oversee the production of a new craft, why not get the private sector to make the vehicles instead? Up until now, NASA has had exhaustive input in vehicle design, and it's been in charge of production. Now, the commercial companies are in charge of both. The government purchases rides on those vehicles, a bit like buying a seat on a plane. It may sound a bit like the deal with Russia, but this time, NASA is supporting American business and bringing human spaceflight back to US soil, which our government loves.
Of launching American astronauts on American rockets
from American soil.
All in all, the program was intended to light a fire under the commercial spaceflight industry. NASA is a partial investor in the Crew Dragon, and now that it's complete, SpaceX can use the capsule to create a new space tourism business. The other goal, in true capitalist fashion, was to spark competition and lower costs for NASA. That's why the agency picked 2 companies, SpaceX and Boeing, to develop these vehicles. It created an intense rivalry between the 2, but SpaceX got to the finish line first.
We're go for launch. Let's light this candle.
In preparation for the mission, NASA assigned SpaceX its first human passengers, astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. They've been training in simulators at SpaceX headquarters. Last year, the company did a dry run with the Crew Dragon, launching it to the space station and docking without a crew on board. They also tested the capsule's abort system, designed to carry the spacecraft to safety if something went wrong during a launch. But there have been bumps in the road.
An explosion rips apart SpaceX's Crew Dragon capsule.
In 2019, a Crew Dragon capsule exploded during a test on the ground, and a couple of SpaceX's Falcon 9s have blown up within the last few years too. All in all, the mission came together a couple years later than NASA wanted it to. Actually, a couple years and a couple days. NASA missed their first launch window on May 27th on account of weather.
I don't think we're going to get there with any of the rules today.
But after all that, the launch did come together. So what now? Well, first, the astronauts need to finish their mission. Bob and Doug will dock with the ISS and spend a number of weeks on board. After that, they'll climb back into the Crew Dragon, detach from the station, and make the perilous journey back to Earth. A suite of parachutes will lower them gently into the ocean, where they'll be retrieved by a SpaceX boat. In the long term, it's possible that this could become the norm for NASA. The space agency has standing contracts with both SpaceX and Boeing for regular flights to the space station, and they're considering the same contracting method for a new crewed lunar lander. Once again, the companies would build the lander, and NASA would pay to hitch a ride. And finally, this launch could bring the dawn of space tourism that much closer. SpaceX has already promised to send tourists to orbit on its Crew Dragon next year. There's even a rumor that SpaceX will be sending Tom Cruise to the space station for a movie. But will there be a steady stream of private customers on Crew Dragon? That question will be answered in the years ahead.
It is absolutely our honor to be part of this.
Hey everyone, we've been writing a ton about this launch from home because of the pandemic, but if you want to read more about it, head over to theverge.com. We've got plenty to keep you occupied.